The quill ripped across the parchment like steel tearing through armor. Charles's hand shook, not from weakness but from the violent storm raging inside him. Each letter of his name carved into the cream paper felt like a sword stroke severing flesh from bone. Ink poured onto the page like blood, staining history itself with betrayal. This was no mere signature, it was an execution. The chamber held its breath, suffocated by silence. Only the ancient clock dared to speak, its ticking a war drum counting down to annihilation. Every strike rang like the toll of a bell at a funeral, the funeral of a marriage, of trust, of a love once defended with fire. Charles seized the seal, his grip white-knuckled, and slammed it into the hot wax. The crown's imprint hissed as it burned into the page, branding the decree with finality. It was brutal, merciless, irreversible. And in that single act, the storm broke. The King of England had unleashed judgment. The Queen he once shielded with his honor was no longer his partner, she was his enemy. The throne had demanded sacrifice, and tonight it claimed his heart. The betrayal had been festering for weeks, clawing at him in the stillness of sleepless nights. Camilla's voice lingered in his mind, not as a memory of comfort, but as a whisper of treachery. He had discovered letters, hidden, coded, exchanged with allies who had no place in the sanctity of the throne. Deals made in the dark. Secrets whispered in corridors where trust should have been sacred. And worst of all, her words in those letters spoke not of love nor loyalty, but of power, her survival, her willingness to sacrifice him if it meant keeping her crown. The king stared at the papers, his chest heavy with a grief that felt like iron. Divorce was more than an end, it was a public execution of trust. He had endured decades of scandal, humiliation, and whispered doubts about his worthiness to reign. But nothing compared to this. This betrayal was personal. It tore into the marrow of his being, leaving behind nothing but shards of bitterness. Beyond the heavy oak doors of his study, the palace quivered with whispers. News of the divorce papers, though concealed within the king's private chambers, had already slipped into the bloodstream of Buckingham. Servants exchanged nervous glances. Advisers muttered in hushed tones. Guards, trained to stoicism, felt their grips tighten on their spears. The palace was alive with the pulse of scandal. A storm was coming, and everyone within those gilded walls knew it. Charles rose from his chair, his movements slow but filled with the gravity of finality. He gazed at the portrait of his ancestors lining the walls. Kings who had faced wars, rebellions, and betrayals of their own. But this betrayal, this venom inside his own home, was far worse. To be deceived by a wife, by a queen he had once defended against the world, was a humiliation that clawed deeper than any public scandal. He closed his eyes, remembering their earliest days, the stolen moments, the whispered promises of love unbroken. She had once been his refuge against the suffocating weight of royal duty. Now, she had become the very shadow threatening to destroy him. And then came the memory of her voice, haunting, mocking. "If you cast me aside, Charles, the world will burn with the secrets I hold." He had dismissed it as desperate words, the lashing of a woman fearing the end of power. But those secrets were real. If unleashed, they could scorch the monarchy to its foundations. He drew a deep breath, his body rigid as steel. This was not merely about love lost, it was a battle for survival. Camilla had betrayed him. But worse, she had betrayed the throne. And for that, her reign was finished. The heavy doors creaked as he opened them. Outside, an aide waited, eyes lowered, breath shallow. Charles handed over the signed decree. "Deliver this," he said, voice steady though his heart roared with fury. The aide bowed and hurried away, clutching the papers as though carrying a ticking bomb. And in truth, it was one. For once those papers left the chamber, there was no turning back. In the shadows of the palace, a storm gathered. The betrayal of a queen was about to rip through the monarchy like thunder across a night sky. And though the king had acted with finality, he knew this was only the beginning. For Camilla would not go quietly. The echo of hurried footsteps broke the stillness of Buckingham's corridors. The divorce papers had not yet reached their final destination when word slipped through the cracks like smoke from a fire. And when that smoke reached Camilla, it set her ablaze. She stormed through the palace like a tempest, emerald skirts trailing behind her, heels striking the marble with venomous rhythm. Guards shifted uneasily as she passed, but none dared stop her. Her fury was a force of its own, one that even walls seemed to shrink from. By the time she reached Charles's study, her eyes burned with a mix of rage and desperation, the eyes of a woman betrayed but unwilling to surrender. The doors burst open with a violent shove. Charles, still standing by the fireplace, turned sharply. For a brief moment, silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Then her voice shattered it like glass. "So it's true," she spat, her words slicing through the air. "You would dare disgrace me like this? A divorce? Signed in secret, as though I were some servant you could discard." Charles's face was pale, yet unyielding. He met her gaze with the weary steel of a man who had made his choice. "You brought this upon yourself, Camilla," he said, each syllable deliberate. "Your betrayal cannot be forgiven." Her laugh was harsh, brittle, echoing against the study walls. "Betrayal? You think I betrayed you? After everything I sacrificed? I gave up my freedom, my reputation, my dignity, for you. And now you throw me to the wolves." "You gave nothing," Charles snapped, his voice rising like thunder. "You bartered. You schemed. Every sacrifice you claim was only a step toward power. And now the mask has slipped." She stepped closer, hands trembling but her words sharp as daggers. "You fool. Do you think the world will stand with you when I speak? Do you think your precious throne will survive when I unleash the secrets you and your court have buried? One word from me, Charles, and centuries of royal dignity will burn to ashes." For the first time, his composure cracked. His jaw tightened, and his hand clenched at his side. "You dare." His voice was low, dangerous. "You would scorch this monarchy to satisfy your pride?" She leaned closer, so close he could feel her breath against his cheek. "If I must fall, I will drag you down with me. The throne will be your tombstone, Charles." The words lingered like poison in the air. Charles stepped back, his eyes locked on hers. There was no trace of the woman he had once loved, only a queen-turned-predator, desperate to survive. Outside the doors, two aides froze, hearing every venomous syllable. Their eyes widened, knowing the confrontation would spread like wildfire through the palace by nightfall. Gossip in royal circles was a currency more dangerous than gold, and tonight it would flow unchecked. Charles turned away, voice steady though his shoulders sagged. "You've shown your true self, Camilla. Whatever love we had is dead. You are no partner, you're a threat." Her hand trembled on the desk, eyes flickering with fleeting sorrow before hardening to venom. "Do what you must. I will never kneel, to you, to William, to anyone. Strip my power, but not my will." She spun, skirts flaring, and slammed the doors behind her, the echo like a gunshot. By the fire, Charles stared into the embers. Her threat was real. A cornered queen was more dangerous than any enemy. The storm had already broken inside the palace walls. William heard the news not from his father, but from an aide who had caught the shouting. Without hesitation, he left Kensington, his motorcade cutting through London's grey dawn with a single vow burning in his chest. This ends now. William found Charles alone, the fire dying low, the seal still cooling on the desk. He stared at the papers, then at his father's face, lined with years that had nothing to do with age. "You did it," William said flatly. "There was no choice," Charles replied. "There was," William countered, voice hardening. "You chose the crown. I will choose you." Charles flinched, the mask cracking. "It must be both. Lose the crown, and we lose everything, including each other." The door opened. Catherine entered, calm as night itself, eyes taking in the scene without question. She placed her phone on the desk. "First, we stabilize. No leaks. Communications controlled. Legal will lock language. Security will lock people." William's jaw tightened. "There won't be control if she speaks." "She will," Catherine said coldly. "So we make truth heavier than her poison." Charles exhaled, torn between surrender and resolve. She has letters. Names. Then we bury them under evidence, Catherine replied. Rumor dies when truth leaves no air to breathe. William looked to the dark lawns outside. I want her gone. Not just from this house, out of our lives. You want victory, Catherine said, and so do I. But victory isn't noise, it's consequence. Her hand steadied William's arm. We'll end her influence without burning the crown. A knock, 2 short, 1 long. The private secretary entered with folders. Catherine scanned quickly. She stays queen in name, but all power routes through you and the sovereign. No councils. No leverage. William's smile was thin, dangerous. A crown without teeth. A crown without claws, Catherine replied. Charles's voice was low. And the country? They'll want blood. They'll be given dignity, Catherine said. Continuity, charity, service. She'll be presentable, contained, then forgotten. People grieve what they understand. We'll help them understand. William's jaw hardened. There's a gala in 48 hours. Cameras will hunt for cracks. Good, Catherine said. We'll give them choreography, not chaos. Silence between you and her will speak louder than words. Charles closed his eyes, seeing ghosts of his past, Camilla radiant and ruinous, his sons fragile, himself compromised. He opened them to the present, William, forged in fire, Catherine, cold precision. Very well, he said. We proceed. Catherine slid a dossier toward William. 3 versions for briefings: statesman, son, soldier. Use what the room deserves. He paused. Soldier. For the ones that need warning, she replied. The private secretary withdrew. Catherine sent a single message, then set her phone down. Security shadows her routes. If she tries a corridor press, it dies before it draws breath. Let her try, William said coldly. I'll be waiting. He turned to Charles, his anger softened by loyalty. You're not alone. For once, the king murmured. I believe that. Catherine gathered the papers into a folio. Tomorrow, noon. A school visit. Cameras. Children. We show service, not scandal. Then the gala. Then the decree. Sequence is everything. And if she breaks ranks first? William asked. Then we pivot, Catherine said evenly. No flinching. No repeating her poison. We look like the future, even if we feel like the past. The 3 stood in rare silence, drawing their battle lines: duty, record, consequence. William took the folio. Catherine touched the divorce decree, almost like a curse. When she enters that ballroom, she said, truth will steal the applause. By the time they left, the fire had collapsed to ash. The king remained, knowing only that the storm was coming, and this time the shore would not move. 2 nights later, Buckingham's chandeliers blazed like constellations. The gala glittered with music and laughter, but beneath it, the walls groaned with secrets. Camilla descended the staircase in emerald silk, jewels glittering, her smile flawless but brittle. To the crowd she was the untouchable queen, yet those near saw the cracks. Her eyes were cold mirrors, hardened by whispers of betrayal and the knowledge that divorce papers awaited. This was no farewell. It was her battlefield. Charles entered to applause, regal and composed, though his eyes were hollow. He stood at her side, the image of unity, but their touch was ice, 2 enemies bound by duty. Then came William and Catherine, greeted with thunderous acclaim. Catherine glowed with unshakable poise. William, sharp and watchful, met Camilla's gaze at last. The clash was silent but lethal. Her faint smirk dared him to strike. The night glittered with speeches and music, but the illusion frayed. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, sensing blood. When Camilla drifted to the wine table, William followed, his presence a shadow of judgment. William, she purred, voice silk over steel. Don't pretend, he cut in coldly. You betrayed him. You threatened the throne. My father may spare you the title, but hear me, this ends. Hurt him again, and I'll leave you with nothing." Her smile cracked. Leaning close, she hissed, "You are so like him, always believing the crown bends to your will. But remember, William, the crown devours everyone. Even you." William didn't flinch. His face was ice, his voice a blade. "Test me, and you'll see how wrong you are." Camilla's brittle laugh cracked like glass, her emerald gown sweeping as she dismissed him with queenly arrogance. But his warning clung to her like a curse. Across the hall, Catherine met William's gaze. No words passed, only a silent command: patience. Strategy, not rage, would decide the monarchy's survival. Yet she saw the storm in her husband's eyes, a fury beyond diplomacy. The orchestra swelled. Charles and Camilla took the dais, smiling for cameras, hands barely touching. To the world it was harmony, to insiders, a charade. The monarchy teetered on a knife's edge, his fractured heart against her venomous pride. Reporters scribbled, whispers spreading like sparks. The storm had peaked, and the night was far from over. When the chandeliers dimmed and guests departed, silence devoured the palace. In his chamber, Charles sat before the final decree. The wax seal cooled under his ring, the crown's imprint pressed into permanence. This was no draft, no threat, this was the end. The King of England had ended his marriage. William entered quietly, shoulders taut. He saw the papers, the seal, and eased only slightly. But his father's eyes carried no triumph, only grief wrapped in duty. "It is done," Charles murmured, his voice stripped of majesty. "But nothing feels lighter, only emptier." William laid a hand on his shoulder. "You've saved the crown. That was the only choice." Charles closed his eyes, the weight of generations pressing down on him. "I once believed love could survive in these walls. Foolish, wasn't it?" "Not foolish," William answered softly. "Just impossible." Across the palace, in a gilded chamber thick with shadows, Camilla sat before her silver mirror. The divorce decree had been delivered to her minutes earlier. She read the words, her face unflinching, but her hand trembled as she set it down. Queen consort in title, but stripped of every shred of influence. The council doors closed to her. Her power gutted. She was a queen in name, a prisoner in truth. Her reflection stared back, crown still glittering, eyes burning. The humiliation cut deeper than any blade. She thought of the years clawed from the jaws of scandal, the sacrifices, the whispers endured, all for this throne. And now she was left caged, her pride shackled, her influence dissolved by a stroke of his pen. She whispered into the mirror, voice like venom, "This isn't over. Not for him. Not for William. Not for any of them." Her vow hung in the room like a curse, a promise only she could hear. The following morning, the palace released its statement. The words were sterile, precise. A private matter, a restructuring of royal responsibilities, the king and queen united in service despite changes in personal circumstances. But the public wasn't blind. They saw the fracture in every photograph, in the distance between Charles and Camilla at the gala, in William's cold gaze when he stood near her. Newspapers screamed betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. The tabloids painted Camilla as a queen undone by her own ambition, while more cautious outlets spoke of duty, sacrifice, and survival. Catherine moved through the chaos like a general on a battlefield, briefing aides, silencing leaks, ensuring the monarchy's public face remained unbroken. She stood at Charles's side for engagements, calm and luminous, while William took to the podiums, speaking of resilience, of the monarchy's strength through storms. Their presence was balm to the public, a symbol that the future was intact. But behind closed doors, the cost was undeniable. Charles walked the palace halls alone at night, the weight of solitude heavier than the crown on his head. He thought of the early years, when Camilla's laughter had been the only thing that pierced the suffocating duty. Now that laughter was a memory-turned weapon, haunting him. William, for all his victory, found no triumph. His father was broken, his stepmother dangerous even in defeat, and the monarchy now lived on a fault line that could shatter at the slightest tremor. Catherine told him they had won a battle, not the war. And he knew she was right. Camilla remained in her chamber, her crown gleaming like a shackle. She appeared at public events when commanded, smiling, waving, but every gesture was hollow. The courtiers whispered of a queen turned ghost, stripped of her claws but still capable of poison. Her silence was more terrifying than her threats. For a cornered queen never forgets, and never forgives. In the end, the monarchy survived. The throne endured. The image was polished until it gleamed again in the eyes of the world. But within the palace walls, love lay in ruins, trust reduced to ashes, and the cold distance between king and queen became the most dangerous secret of all. The storm had passed, but the darkness it left behind promised another. Because the crown devours. And it had already begun its feast. For more updates, like and subscribe the channel.